I'm Jordan Poole from the University of Michigan Basketball. You are watching TR Sports. Please enjoy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to episode 11 of TR Sports. I'm your host, Toby, and it is summer now. It was summer last week, but it's officially, we're starting summer. I'm on vacation. I'm in Maine, but I'm not going to stop making videos for you guys because here at TR Sports, we do not stop. The grind does not stop. We're going to be back for when the 2 weeks I'm in Maine, we're dropping 2 podcasts. So, of course, this is the first. We have a decent lineup today. There's a lot happening in sports because it is the beginning of summer. Whenever it's the beginning of summer, there's always a lot happening in every sport. So we did a segment on the Philadelphia Phillies last week, and we'll be talking about that this week, but it will be a follow-up and how they picked up their season again, got out of this losing stretch. Then we're going to be talking about some NBA free agency predictions. Keyword is some. We're not going to be doing all. Too much to cover. Then we're going to be talking about Houston Rockets trying to get a sign-and trade for Jimmy Butler from the Philadelphia 76ers. So that's a big story. We'll be talking about that. MLB All-Star starters were announced. We'll be looking into that and how that, what players made it and did they deserve it and was it the right choice. And then, finally, we will have Team Focus. Yes, guys, Team Focus is returning to TR Sports. In this episode, we are going to be talking about the Mets. And is it panic time for their season? So, let's just get right into TR Sports this week. The Philadelphia Phillies. Last week, we did a story on the team and how they lost 6 straight. They lost to the Nationals. They were losing to the Braves. They were losing to the Diamondbacks. They were losing to the Marlins. They got swept by the Marlins. So that's terrible. That is not good baseball. Clearly, if you get swept by the Marlins, you're not playing good baseball. So they come into this week. There's a lot of nerves from all the Phillies fans, from the players. Is it over for the season? You know, is it just, have the injuries finally got to this team? Is it time to bow out of the race? And they have a series against the Mets, and they come out swinging, and they win Game 1. They win Game 1 7-13. Finally, there's a win. Great win for the Phillies. Next one, they win 5-7. Another great win. Team effort, right? Then after that, they walk it off. Jay Bruce walks it off. With a double and extra innings. Great job by Jay Bruce. And then finally, Gene Segura with the walk-off homer on a back-to-back date wins the game for the Phillies 6-3. So a really good bounce-back week for the Phillies. You literally could not ask for anything better. They play the Marlins Friday, which I'm recording this segment on Friday, so I don't know who won that. But we're going to talk about the Mets series. Really great job by the Phillies, showing a team effort. And momentum's a huge thing in sports, and the Phillies are picking their momentum back. They're getting it back. Players with good outings. Aaron Nola had 10 strikeouts, didn't allow much on Thursday. So, great job by the Phillies this week. Great job by Aaron Nola. Gene Segura, of course, with the walk-off, has been contributing all season. Bryce Harper finally hits a homer. But again, not a bright sparkle for him this week because on Wednesday, the 4-5 game with Jay Bruce's walk-off, he struck out about 3 times. But he hit a homer Thursday in that Gene Segura walk-off game. So a lot of momentum now shifting into the Phillies' direction. Let's see if they can translate it into more wins, especially against the Braves because they find themselves in a pretty big hole right now, 4.5 games back of the division lead. So there's a lot. There still has to be improved. I still believe they have to make a trade for a starting pitcher, like I said last week. But the momentum is great for the Phillies. They have a winning record. Will they make it to the playoffs? I really don't know at this point, but if they keep this up and they keep doing team efforts like this and they keep hustling through games that they're down by, there's a lot of potential for a great season and playoff time for the Phillies. So that is the Philadelphia Phillies segment for today's episode. When we come back on TR Sports, we are going to be looking at my NBA free agency predictions. Why? What's happening in the NBA? Where is everyone going to go? Again, Jimmy Butler's coming up. Where is he going to go? Where is Tobias Harris going to go? Where is Kevin Durant going to go? These are my final unchanged predictions right here on TR Sports. Welcome back to TR Sports. It is now time for our next story, NBA free agency. A lot of people's favorite time of the NBA season because in the NBA free agency, it's different from a lot of the other sports free agencies. It seems like for the past 3 years now, every time free agency hits, the landscape completely changes in the NBA. So many stars move. That is a new thing in the NBA. So it's a very exciting time for many fans to see the new changes in the landscape, to see where all the players go, to see if their team gets a big guy. So it's an exciting time for a lot of fans. For me this year personally, I'm not a huge fan of it, just because two of my Sixers players, Jimmy Butler and Tobias Harris, might not come back. And the Sixers really need them to be a contender. So for me, I'm scared this offseason. So there's really two opposite spectrums when it comes to free agency. Fans who have players that might leave who are scared, and fans that are super excited because they might possibly get the big fish in free agency. So, I'm going to give some free agency predictions now. Not all of them, and some of these are really tough. A lot of them, actually. But I'm going to give my best predictions. They could be all wrong, they could be all right. I don't have any insider information. This is just my personal opinion. And I'm going to try my best to give you guys what I think is going to happen. So I think a good way to start off is Kemba Walker. Played a long time for the Hornets. And they're not apparently offering him a max this year. They're not going to give him the most money possible. So I know if they're not going to give him the money, the super max I think he's eligible for, they're not going to give that to him. I'm sure he's going to leave Charlotte. Kemba Walker, great player, shooting guard. I think he's going to go to the Boston Celtics because they are going to let Kyrie Irving go this offseason, and they're going to pick up a guy like Kemba Walker, who's sometimes not as standoffish and dominant as Kyrie, but has a lot of the same talents as he does. Maybe not as talented, but maybe a better fit for that team and that locker room. Another interesting one is Klay Thompson. It's not super interesting, actually, but, a lot of people talked about him going to another LA team, maybe the Lakers, maybe the Clippers. There was a lot of talk about that. But personally, I believe Klay Thompson's going to stay at the Warriors. I think there's really no doubt about it. Had a great run, went to 5 championships in a row, and he is a great player, and he is a solid piece of that team, and he is one of the greatest shooters I've ever seen. And he might be the greatest shooter of all time, depending on what you think. Steph Curry, Ray Allen, I don't know. There's Jimmy Butler, who we'll talk about next segment. So we're going to skip him for the free agency predictions because there's 2 real destinations for Jimmy at this point, and we're going to talk about that later. Kyrie is the next guy we're going to talk about. How do I explain Kyrie Irving's story? He demanded a trade from the Cleveland Cavaliers. He played with LeBron, and he said, you know what, I want to be my own guy. I want to lead my own team. That's what he does. He goes out, and they get traded to the Celtics. First year is a success. He gets injured. His team goes to the Eastern Conference Finals without him. They lose in 7 to the Cavs. So he comes back this year, and he says at the beginning of the season, I'm going to re-sign. I'm going to stay with this team. So he does plays the season out. A terrible year for the Celtics. Lose early in the playoffs. And there's a lot of blame on Kyrie. And I think the Celtics thinks one of the way to fix their problems is by getting rid of Kyrie and replacing him, as I said, like a guy with Kemba Walker. So there's been a lot of reports that Kyrie is going to go to the Nets. So I'm going to have to say Nets too. If everything's pointing to the Nets, why would I disagree? That should be a great fit in Brooklyn. What are they going to do with D'Angelo Russell exactly? we're not sure. Kawhi Leonard, another complicated one. He demanded a trade from the Spurs. They trade him to the Raptors in a semi-risky move by the Raptors. And the Raptors go all the way this year, but it still might not matter to him. He really wants to go to a team in LA. And I'm not gonna go with the safe bet here. I think he is going to go to the Los Angeles Lakers. They have a max cap space. The reluctancy that it seems for him to re-sign with the Raptors is a lot. Again, this is a risky bet. The odds of this happening aren't great, but that's what I think is going to happen. So I think he's going to go to that team up with LeBron and Anthony Davis, because what I see is a man that's reluctant to play in Toronto and live there. Not that there's anything wrong with Toronto, but I think he wants to be in a bright place like LA. Kevin Durant, a lot of people said he's going to leave. I said a couple weeks ago that he is now going to stay at the Warriors. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking of maybe changing my prediction, but I'm going to stay with the Warriors. I don't believe he's going to go anywhere. It's possible for the Knicks, but I feel like the safer bet is the Knicks. And we're going to do one last prediction here. Tobias Harris. He was on the Sixers last year, and I'm pretty sure they're going to let him go. They have not offered him a max. So I think personally, Tobias Harris is going to go. If the Sixers aren't going to give him the money that he wants, a lot of people are saying the Nets. A lot of people are saying the Knicks. But I believe he is probably going to go to the Mavericks. The Nets is a real possibility too. But I feel like the best prediction would be the Mavericks. They're going to get some guy this offseason, middle tier or high tier. I'm not sure. But they're going to get someone. And I believe that guy's going to be Tobias Harris. Great shooter, great player. I got to watch him last year. And if he does leave the Sixers, I wish him the best. A couple guys I didn't really go over, and that's D'Angelo Russell. And that's really it. D'Angelo Russell, because there's so much going on with him, I really don't know what's going to happen. Could he go back to the Lakers? Yeah, it's possible. Could he go to the Nets? That's also possible if they don't land a big fish. He could go to the Timberwolves. He would be a nice fit there too. So there's a lot up in the air in free agency. It's a big time for the NBA, and a lot of fans' favorite time to watch the sport. So those are my free agency predictions. So when we come back, we'll be talking more NBA free agency with Jimmy Butler. The Rockets want to acquire him via a strange way. So that will be up next on TR Sports. Welcome back to TR Sports. It is now time to talk about Jimmy Butler, and oh boy, what a year it was for Jimmy Butler last year. Let's review that before we start talking about this possible situation of the Rockets acquiring Jimmy Butler. So we're gonna review past. We're gonna go even farther back than the beginning of last year. Jimmy Butler is in Chicago. He wants to get out of there, so they trade him to the Timberwolves on draft night for Lauri Markkanen. So the Timberwolves are going to make a run. It's going to be great. So he plays out the year with the Timberwolves and was really a star, but he got injured with the last half of the season, was not able to play a lot. But he is able to come back for the playoffs, and they lose early in the playoffs. Not great for him. And that was about the last time we're really going to see Jimmy be a Timberwolf. Because in the offseason, Jimmy puts on a show. He puts on an absolute, he goes mad. That's how I can describe it. Jimmy gets so mad at the Timberwolves front office. There's an infamous practice, if you guys remember that, where Jimmy was cursing at the sidelines and where he beat the starting five. He beat the starting five with the bench. He played with the bench and he beat the starting five, and he was making a big deal out of it, and it's an infamous moment in Jimmy Butler's career history. And he was on the record many times saying Some of his teammates in Minnesota were lazy, guys like Karl-Anthony Towns, guys like Andrew Wiggins. He said they were lazy and didn't try hard. So this huge Jimmy Butler situation goes on for months. It goes on for a long time, and he's never traded. But one point later in the season, a deal is finally made. The 76ers decide to acquire Jimmy Butler. And the two main pieces they gave away was Dario Saric and Robert Covington. And this was the star guy Philadelphia needed. They needed a guy who was able to make buckets. He can drive, he can shoot, he can do everything they need, and he can close games for the Sixers. And then later in the year, as I said, they acquired Tobias Harris. And then they go on and they almost beat the Raptors. So close off that bank shot in Game 7. Kawhi with the bounce shot, 1, 2, 3, 4, goes in Game 7, the buzzer beater, and the Raptors go on to win it all, and the Sixers are left heartbroken. So it is now the offseason once again, and Jimmy Butler is faced with the situation. Did I enjoy my time enough in Philadelphia, or is it time to go on another venture? And that's where the Rockets come in. The Rockets are looking for a star. They had quite a season last year. They had a very interesting one where at times they looked like they could possibly miss the playoffs. But they also had one of the MVP candidates, James Harden, carry them through the season. But they ended up losing to the Warriors in 6. And they had quite a season, quite a drama. And the year before, they almost beat the Warriors in the Western Conference Finals. They took them to 7, and then they lost. James Harden was out. James Harden is known as a playoff choker. Maybe he can switch that image like Kyle Lowry, but that's off topic. So, the Rockets are looking for a third big guy to pair Chris Paul and James Harden with, and they see that in Jimmy Butler. So what they want Jimmy Butler to do is sign with the Sixers. But they want the Sixers to trade Jimmy Butler to the Rockets for Clint Capella, Eric Gordon, and PJ Tucker. And you ask, why are the Rockets trying to do a sign and trade when they could just sign him? The reason is they can't sign him. They don't have the cap space to do that. They're not able to do that. They cannot do that. They have to get Jimmy from the Sixers. They have to get him to trade because they don't have the money to offer him that contract. And you're asking, why would the Sixers do this? Why would they listen to this? And that's because the Rockets almost have some leverage. If they convince Jimmy Butler to force a sign and trade, the Sixers are going to have to sign him because instead of letting him just walk in free agency, they can get Jimmy Butler and then trade him to the Rockets for a guy like Clint Capella, PJ Tucker, and Eric Gordon. A lot of guys are saying this is a terrible idea for Houston. Guys like Stephen A. Smith, mostly because of the personalities in Houston. There's a lot of Chris Paul and James Harden are feuding a lot. It's a big mess right there, and they said Jimmy Butler and his personality would not at all fit with with Chris Paul and James Harden. But what do I think? What do I think of this deal? What do I think of it for the Sixers and the Rockets? I think it's a disaster on both sides. You don't want to let Jimmy Butler go if you're the Sixers. It's not a complete disaster for you because you do get Clint Capella, who you can flip into bench players, and you do get two great role players in Eric Gordon and PJ Tucker. But you are trying to keep Jimmy Butler. Keep your eye on the prize. Stay focused. Get that big three back together, especially if you're not going to offer Tobias Harris a max. For the Rockets, personalities don't work. You're giving away a lot of your team. I think it would be a mess for the Rockets. I seriously warn them not to do that. And if I'm a Rockets fan, I'm really worried that might actually happen because the personalities and just having zero bench does not seem to be a good idea for the Rockets. But luckily for both teams, I don't believe this is going to happen. I don't believe the Rockets are going to pull off convincing Jimmy to convince a signing trade to Houston, no less, which is not known as a big free agency destination. They did the same sign and trade with Chris Paul. We can see if they do it again with Jimmy Butler, but I don't think it's going to happen. So that is the Jimmy Butler sign and trade Houston Rockets situation. When we come back on TR Sports, we are going to be reacting to the MLB All-Star starters. Do I think it was do I think there were good picks? Do I think they deserved it? All that good stuff coming up on TR Sports. Welcome back to TR Sports. It is now time for our next story, the All-Star Game in the MLB. My favorite of all the All-Star events. And you may ask, why do I like the MLB All-Star Game more than, NBA, NFL Pro Bowl Week, and even the NHL All-Star Game? And that's because in baseball, unlike basketball, unlike football, you can never not try in baseball. You just can't. You cannot go up there as a batter and not try, because baseball doesn't work like that. And so MLB All-Star Game, everyone throws their hardest, everyone tries to hit the ball, everyone tries to hit homers, and everyone's playing their best, and that's what really makes it fun. And as if we go back to week 1, I did a rant about Johnny Bench, and Johnny Bench, telling players to stop expressing their personality because it's ruining the game. And I said, I don't like that. Players should be able to express their personality. That's the reason the College World Series with Vanderbilt winning this year. That's why it was so popular, because people got to see how much fun the players had. And I don't like when old school guys tell players to stop expressing themselves. And the All-Star Week is a perfect week for players to express their personalities, talk to the fans, and have fun while doing it. So this segment, we are going to review the MLB All-Star starters, what I think of them, and did they deserve the spot against the guys they were against. So we're going to start in the National League with Wilson Contreras. I'll put a graphic of the starting lineup on the screen right now. Wilson Contreras, of course, he's having a crazy great season. He's the reason that Cubs team is still afloat, and without him, this Cubs team, I don't know where they would be. They probably would not be first in the division. So he's a very great asset for the Cubs. And, of course, if he does all that, deserves the starting position. First baseman, Freddie Freeman. This was a tough position this year. You had a lot of great players going against him, guys like Rhys Hoskins, who didn't even make the vote. But Freddie Freeman wins it in the end. He's crazy consistent every year. He's got more than 20 homers this year. And he can hit for average, he can hit for homers, he can hit for runs, he can hit for extra base hits. He can do anything that anyone else in the league can do, and he's consistent with it, and he's on a first-place team. So I say, why not let him start the All-Star game? Ketel Marte, you had a lot of guys saying, Ketel Marte made it over all these great guys, and people are raging, and I'm just thinking to myself, Ketel Marte is having a great power season. He's helping a Diamondbacks team that without him would be otherwise much worse off, and he's been able to hit power at the second base position, so he definitely deserves the starting spot there. Javi Baez, what are you gonna say? Does he necessarily deserve the position over some of the great guys that were in play for shortstop this year? No, not necessarily, but he's at the same level or better than most of them. So if he does that, and he's a flashy player, and fans like him, then why not vote him into the All-Star game? And he's a great player. He's really improved his game. If you look, even 2 years ago, he was the guy who could run the bases and play defense. He wasn't a great hitter, and he wasn't a great home run hitter. But recently, he's done a great job at that. Been one of the best shortstops in the league. He hit for power last year. He's hitting for power this year, and he's super fun to watch down there in Chicago. Nolan Arenado. I mean, you go back to last year, I really did have doubts about Nolan Arenado on another team. How would he do? Is it Coors Field that's really making him this great of a player? And now I really believe, watching him more and analyzing him more, that his defense coped with his power hitting and average hitting. He's the best third baseman in the league, no question. Even if he was somewhere else, I do think he would step back a little, but not to the level where he would not be considered in a role for an all-star starter. So even this year, Nolan Arenado had a bit of a slow start, but really picked it up with his defense and started hitting power again down in Coors Field. Definitely deserves the spot. Now, we're just going to do all three outfielders at once because clearly all three of these guys deserved it. Ronald Acuna Jr., Cody Bellinger, Christian Yelich. If you guys noticed, no Bryce Harper this year. Having a terrible season right now. But I think he'll pick it up after the All-Star break like he did last year. But Yelich, of course, deserve it. Having a crazy season. Had a crazy start. We can go all the way back to episode 1, and you can see me analyzing Christian Yelich beginning of the season. Same thing with Cody Bellinger and Acuna. So all three of them having great seasons, especially Yelich and Bellinger. But Ronald Acuna is a young star in the making that definitely deserves that spot. Okay, so let's move on to the American League. It's weird to see this year there's a lot less star power in the American League than the National League, but many of the teams are better in the American League. So, let's start with catcher again, Gary Sanchez. I hate to say it, I'm not a big fan of Gary Sanchez. I don't really like his game, just being able to hit power and that's it. I really don't enjoy watching that. But he's having a great power season. If you have a great power season in this league, you're going to be an all-star. That's how it works. Can't really field, doesn't have a great average. But he was able to hit homers, and that's how he made the all-star game this year. And I give it to him. His average isn't that bad, so good for Gary. Carlos Santana, an all-star starter. That's all I'm going to say. He was on the Phillies last year. He really wasn't anything special, and I haven't watched a lot of him this year either. But apparently with the Indians, he's really thriving there and is really hitting well and having a good bounce-back season. So really good for Carlos. I haven't watched a lot of him, so I don't really know what he's improved on from last year. But I think a lot of it is a lot of minor improvements, not trying to do anything too big and adjust it. And I think it worked for Carlos Santana. DJ LeMahieu, shortstop, coming in when he got signed with the Yankees. Personally, I thought it was a great signing for the Yankees, just what they needed. And when I was watching the election show, they did on ESPN for the All-Star game, they did an election show of who were the starters when they announced it. And they just kept on saying DJ LeMahieu came in for a utility guy, and that is true. And now he's becoming an actual star on the Yankees. Maybe the best player on the Yankees right now, maybe playing the best, great average, good power numbers, good on-base percentage, good everything for DJ LeMahieu. Great season for him. Shortstop is where it gets a little tricky for some people that don't always watch the games. Jorge Polanco, and I remember him on the Pirates, and I remember seeing his swing, and I said, Polanco could be really good one day, and he's fulfilling that path he started on a couple years ago on the Pirates. He is great. He made it over Lindor, and he made it over some other great shortstops. But they said Lindor got robbed, but that is not the case. Jorge Polanco has hit a better average, more power numbers, better on-base percentage, better OPS. All across the board, he's having a better season than Lindor. Alex Bregman. What can you say about this guy? He's a stud. He's a stud since he came in the league. In the past 2 years, he's really come out of his shell to be a great player, and he really deserves that spot. Great power numbers, great average. That's why he's an all-star starter. What can I say? So deserves that spot, definitely. Okay, time to go on to the outfield. Again, we're going to do all three outfielders at once, and this is the opposite of the National League. There's a lot of surprises here. Mike Trout, number 1. George Springer, number 2. And Hunter Pence, number 3. Those are... wow. Hunter Pence was washed up. He was going to go out of the league. I didn't think he had anything left in the tank. Comes this year and is able to play really well and is able to become an all-star starter on this Rangers team that's not getting a lot of attention. And he's been able to produce on that team. And we might do a Rangers team focus soon, actually. So, Hunter Pence, he's injured. Did he deserve the spot? It's arguable. Some other great guys were in that spot, but I guess he deserves it for the improvement that he went from last season to this season. Mike Trout, do I really have to say anything? He's the reincarnation of Mickey Mantle. Babe Ruth, whatever you want to say. Mike Trout is a beast, and he definitely deserves that spot. Finally, George Springer. He's a beast. He won World Series MVP. There's no outfielders right now in the American League that deserve the spot over him, so of course he deserves it. But if he was in the National League, Hunter Pence and certainly George Springer would not make it in that lineup. So the National League lineup to me is better than the American League lineup, but the American League teams, some of them are better than the National League teams. So that concludes this All-Star segment. When we do come back, however, we are going to be talking about the Mets, and we are going to be bringing back Team Focus this week, right here on TR Sports. Welcome back to TR Sports, and you heard the intro, and you guys at this point all know what that means. We are back with the Team Focus, and today we are going to be doing the Mets. Oh boy, is it panic time for the Mets? They've dropped six straight. That's terrible. And it's kind of like the Phillies situation, just a slightly worse. So going into this year, the Mets were supposed to be finally good. Mets fans were rejoicing their team was supposed to be half decent. But that is not really the case. They have been really struggling of late. Their bullpen is terrible. They have to bring guys out like Lugo, and they brought some guys out. I watched the game last night to prepare for this episode, and they brought some guys out that I didn't even know. Don't get me wrong, this Mets team does have a lot of bright spots. Pete Alonso is so good. 28 homers as of Saturday. What's today's date? Saturday the 29th. But he's the super. He is so good this year, and he should be good for many years to come. Already broke the rookie home run record for the Mets. And you have other bright spots, like their starting lineup. Noah Syndergaard and Jacob deGrom are two really good pitchers. But deGrom is not. He's not at all having last season he had. He is struggling at times, and he hasn't been too effective this year. His ERA is not under 2. It's over 3, if I believe. He's having a better season than some other Cy Young winners / candidates from last year. Like he's having a better season than Aaron Nola. He's having a better season than Blake Snell. He's having a better season than Kyle Friedland. But still struggling. The Mets and him too. Not where he was last year. Noah Syndergaard also is not where he was a couple of years ago, but he's still a bright spot of that team. And when the Mets traded, they traded for two guys in Seattle. They traded Jay Bruce and some other guy to Seattle for Robinson Cano and Edwin Diaz. And I expected Robinson Cano to be terrible, which he has. And I expected Edwin Diaz to be great. I expected him to keep up what he was doing, and I thought it was a good pickup for the Mets. His ERA is over 3 as a relief pitcher and as a closer. They need someone in the bullpen. They really do need someone to step it up for them. And unfortunately, that's not been Edwin Diaz for them. He is looking like an average reliever, and that is certainly not what they need. They need someone who can go in, close the game, and be a stud. So Seattle trade was supposed to really help this Mets team out, and that's not what has happened. In general, the Mets have good pieces. They have a future. But my question is, can the Wilpons and the Mets bring it together in years down the line? Are they able to grab more assets? Are they able to develop young talent? That is the question with the Mets. And to get out of the 6-game losing streak, you just have to. The bullpen has to close a game. They blew a bunch of games. They blew Phillies, and they lost to the Braves, and they had a real good chance to win that with bases loaded. Pete Alonso was up, strikes out. So my question is, can the bullpen close it out? And that's how the Mets snap this losing streak, and that's how they become a good team or even a great team in the NL again. They're about 10 games back now, so not looking good for the Mets, and they're probably out of the division race at this point. They were predicted. I never did win predictions, but I predicted them at about like 83 wins, and that is certainly not what they've been doing. So, if I had to grade the Mets as a team, I gotta be a B-. I'm sorry, they have great pieces, and the sum of their parts aren't as good as each individual piece for the Mets. So, not a contender. I'm sorry, Mets fans. Certainly not a contender. But that does conclude today's TR Sports. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, I'm in Maine, so I'm still trying to make these episodes for you because I really love doing this for you guys. And it's a pleasure making a podcast every week. And we're going to continue doing that next week. We'll also be in Maine, but we'll still make a podcast. So hope you guys really enjoyed this episode. I certainly enjoyed making it. I will see you guys next week.